Imagine being at the most anticipated wedding of the year, surrounded by perfect flowers and elegant guests, when suddenly the maid of honor takes the microphone and reveals a secret so devastating that it changes everyone's lives forever. This is the true story of Clara, a woman who kept silent for 10 years until she couldn't anymore. What you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about true love, family loyalty, and the price of silence. Clara Mendoza wakes up at 5 in the morning in her tiny studio apartment, the same place where she's lived for the past 5 years, since her life changed forever. It's not that she wants to wake up so early, but the pain in her joints doesn't allow her to sleep longer. It's as if thousands of tiny crystals move through her entire body every time she tries to change positions. The dawn light filters weakly through the cheap curtains she bought on clearance 3 years ago, illuminating a reality she'd rather keep in darkness. Her apartment is small but tidy, everything in its place because she can't afford the luxury of disorder when space is so limited. Against the living room wall are more than 20 carefully labeled boxes with her sister's name. For Elena, childhood memories. For Elena, family photos. For Elena, mom's jewelry. For Elena, dad's letters. Each box represents something valuable that Clara has decided to give away because she knows her sister will be able to care for them better than she can. Above all, because Clara isn't sure how much longer she'll be able to take care of anything. She sits slowly on the edge of her single bed, which also functions as a sofa during the day, and fumbles for her medications on a nightstand she bought used for $20. The routine is always the same. 3 blue pills for inflammation, 2 white ones for pain, 1 red capsule to protect her stomach from the rest of the medicines, and 2 vitamins that probably don't do much good but her doctor insists she take. This routine repeats every morning for the past 8 months, when systemic lupus erythematosus decided to become more aggressive. Before, she only took 1 pill a day and could pretend it was something minor, something she could handle without anyone noticing. Now, the row of bottles on her nightstand looks like a small pharmacy, a constant reminder that her body is at war with itself. The pain in her joints greets her like an unwelcome old acquaintance, reminding her that lupus doesn't take days off, doesn't respect special dates, doesn't stop because today is Saturday or because she has important plans. It's a democratic disease in its cruelty. It affects every day equally. Her phone buzzes on a nightstand with a message from Elena sent at 6:30 a.m. "Good morning, sister. Do you have your dress ready? Remember, today is the final fitting before the big day. Only 3 days left, and I'm so excited I couldn't sleep. Thank you for being the best maid of honor a bride could ask for. I love you. 2 hearts." Clara reads a message twice before responding with a simple, "Good morning. Yes, all ready. See you at 11. She doesn't mention that she couldn't sleep either, but for completely different reasons. She doesn't mention that yesterday she received a letter from the hospital demanding immediate payment of her latest consultations, or they would suspend her treatment. Her twin sister, Elena, lives in a completely different world. Identical in physical appearance until a few years ago when Clara began losing weight, and Elena remained radiant, but completely opposite in destiny. Elena is a junior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms, earns in 1 month what Clara earns in 6, lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in the best neighborhood, drives a current year car, and has never had to choose between paying rent or buying medications. Elena is the one getting married to the perfect man, the one with the perfect life that Clara once thought she would have too. Elena doesn't know that Clara secretly sold all the jewelry they inherited from their mother to pay for her treatments. She doesn't know that Clara only works part-time because lupus flares leave her without strength to work full-time. She doesn't know that her twin sister, her other half, is fighting a daily battle just to survive. The irony of a situation doesn't escape Clara as she drags herself to her small kitchen to prepare the cheapest possible breakfast: watery instant coffee and toast with margarine. Exactly 10 years ago, she was the one who had everything planned, the one who was 3 weeks away from getting married, the one who believed she had found the love of her life. Roberto Castillo had been her boyfriend for 4 years. They met in college, He's studying business administration. She's studying literature. They were the perfect couple according to everyone. Handsome, intelligent, with clear plans for the future. Roberto had job offers from important companies. Clara had gotten a position at a prestigious publishing house. They had put a deposit on an apartment, sent wedding invitations, chosen a honeymoon. Then, 3 weeks before the ceremony, the symptoms that would change everything forever began. First was extreme fatigue. Clara would wake up in the mornings feeling like she hadn't slept in days, no matter how many hours she had been in bed. She thought it was wedding stress, something normal for a bride. Roberto joked that she was becoming lazy. Then came the joint pains. Her hands would swell, her knees would get stiff, walking became painful. Too much exercise at the gym. They said, "You're overdoing it to look good in the wedding dress." The skin rashes appeared after. Red butterfly-shaped spots on her cheeks. Lesions that appeared and disappeared without apparent reason. "It's stress," Roberto insisted. "After the wedding you'll feel better." But Clara felt worse every day. The fatigue was so intense that some days she couldn't get out of bed. The pains were so severe that she cried secretly in the bathroom so Roberto wouldn't notice. The rashes made her feel like a monster when she looked in the mirror. 2 weeks before the wedding, she finally went to the doctor. A week of tests, biopsies, consultations with specialists. The diagnosis came like a hammer that destroyed all her plans. Systemic lupus erythematosus, a chronic autoimmune disease that has no cure. It's a disease you'll have to manage your whole life, the rheumatologist explained with the delicacy of someone accustomed to giving bad news. With proper treatment, many people lead relatively normal lives, but there will be good days and bad days. It will require lifelong medications, regular checkups, and you'll probably have to make some lifestyle adjustments. Clara left that consultation feeling as if they had ripped the future from her hands. Everything she had planned, everything she had dreamed of, seemed to wobble on foundations that had suddenly become unstable. She told Roberto that same night. They sat on the sofa of their shared apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts still unopened and task lists to complete for the ceremony that was just 1 week away. "It's lupus," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's an autoimmune disease. It means my immune system attacks my own body. It doesn't cure, but it can be controlled with medications." Roberto remained silent for what felt like an eternity. Clara could see the wheels turning in his head, processing this information that didn't fit with the perfect plans they had made together. "What does this mean for us?" he finally asked. "It means that sometimes I'll be more tired than normal," Clara explained. "I'll have to take medications, go to the doctor more often. Some days might be difficult, but most people with lupus lead normal lives." But Clara could see in his eyes that normal was no longer a word Roberto associated with her. The following days were tense. Roberto became distant, less affectionate, as if he were afraid the disease was contagious. He canceled some plans they had, avoided talking about the future beyond the rapidly approaching wedding. 3 days before the ceremony, Clara had her first severe flare. She woke up with so much pain she could barely move, her joints so inflamed she couldn't close her hands into fists. Roberto found her crying in bed, unable to get up to go to the bathroom. "I can't do this, Clara," he told her that night, avoiding looking her in the eyes. "I thought I could, but I can't. I can't handle the uncertainty of not knowing how you're going to be from one day to the next. I can't plan a future without knowing if you're going to be okay." "Roberto, please," Clara begged. "It's just a rough patch. The doctor said with medications I can lead a normal life." "But it's not going to be normal, is it?" He responded with a coldness Clara had never heard before. "There will be days like today where you can't even get out of bed. There will be medications, doctors, limitations. That's not what I signed up for when we got engaged." Clara felt as if her heart had been torn out. "In marriage vows we say in sickness and in health," she murmured. "That's easy to say when you're not facing reality," Roberto replied. "Clara, you're still young. You can still find someone who can handle this better than I can. But I can't. I'm sorry." Roberto moved out that same night. Clara had to cancel the wedding, return the gifts, face alone the questions from family and friends who wanted to know why the perfect couple had ended so suddenly. She made up a story about irreconcilable differences, about realizing they weren't compatible long-term. She didn't tell anyone the truth about her diagnosis or about how the man who had promised to love her forever had fled at the first sign of real adversity. The following months were the darkest of Clara's life, dealing with a new disease she didn't understand, with medications that made her feel worse before making her feel better, with the loss of a man she thought would be her life partner, with the shame of a canceled wedding that all her acquaintances knew about but no one really understood. Elena was her only support during those months, although Clara never told her complete details of what had happened. She told her she had some health problems, but minimized the severity of the lupus, not wanting to worry her sister, who was building her own career and her own life. Roberto was an idiot. Elena told her one night, while Clara cried on her shoulder, "Any man who leaves you doesn't deserve even a second of your tears. You're going to find someone better, someone who really deserves you." Clara smiled weakly, wishing she could believe those words, but feeling deeply broken inside. 6 months after her breakup, Elena met Roberto at a corporate law conference. Clara had never mentioned her ex-fiancé's last name, and Roberto apparently never mentioned having had a previous serious relationship. When Elena came home excited talking about the incredible man she had met, Clara felt the world stop. "His name is Roberto Castillo," Elena said with shining eyes. "He's intelligent, successful, handsome. And Clara, I've never met someone who made me feel this way. I think he could be the one." Clara was paralyzed. How could she explain to her sister that the man she was falling in love with was the same one who had abandoned her when she needed him most? How could she destroy Elena's happiness without sounding like a jealous and resentful sister? She decided to stay quiet, convincing herself that maybe Roberto had learned from his mistake. Maybe he could make Elena happy in a way he hadn't been able to make her happy. Maybe Elena, being healthy and strong, would never have to face the test that Roberto hadn't been able to overcome with Clara. Months passed, and the relationship between Elena and Roberto intensified. Clara saw them together at family gatherings, pretending not to know Roberto beyond formal introductions. He seemed uncomfortable at first, but eventually acted as if he had never known Clara before Elena introduced her as her sister. During this time, Clara's health stabilized relatively. The medications began to work, flares became less frequent, and she was able to return to work. But the treatment costs remained overwhelming. Her basic health insurance covered only a fraction of the expenses, and Clara was forced to quietly sell the most valuable possession she had. First, she sold the engagement ring Roberto had given her, using the money to pay for several months of medications. Then she sold the jewelry she had inherited from her grandmother, telling Elena she had put them in a safety deposit box to protect them. One by one, family possessions became money to survive. Elena, meanwhile, prospered in all aspects of her life. Her legal career advanced rapidly. Her relationship with Roberto strengthened, and she seemed to have the golden future that Clara had once believed would be hers. Roberto proposed to me last night, Elena announced 2 years after meeting him, showing a diamond ring that probably cost more than Clara's annual salary. Clara smiled and hugged her sister, feeling a complex mixture of genuine joy for Elena's happiness and deep pain for her own loss. "Would you be my maid of honor?" Elena asked with tears of happiness in her eyes. "I can't imagine anyone more important by my side on the most important day of my life." How could Clara say no? How could she explain that being at that wedding would be one of the most painful experiences of her life? Instead, she nodded and promised to be the best maid of honor Elena could wish for. The following months were of intense planning. Elena wanted a perfect wedding, and Clara found herself helping to plan the ceremony she had once dreamed of for herself, with a man she had once loved and who had abandoned her. During this time, Clara's health began to deteriorate again. The emotional stress of the situation, combined with the natural progression of her lupus, caused more frequent and severe flares. She lost weight, developed new rashes, and the pain in her joints intensified. Elena noticed the changes. "Are you eating well?" she would ask frequently. "You look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" Claire became an expert in small lies and deflections. Just work stress. "I've been busy with a project. I think I'm coming down with something." The truth was that some days Clara couldn't get out of bed due to pain. She had lost 2 jobs in recent years due to her frequent absences, and now worked part-time at a library for a salary that barely covered her basic expenses, not to mention the constantly rising medical costs. There were nights when Clara stayed awake doing desperate calculations with a cheap calculator, trying to find ways to make her money stretch to cover everything she needed. Rent, $800. Utilities, $150. Food, $200 if she was very careful and bought only the cheapest items. Medications, $300 per month with her current insurance. That left exactly $50 for everything else. Clothes, transportation, emergencies, any small pleasure that could make life a little more bearable. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Clara had applied for all available financial assistance programs, but her part-time salary placed her in a cruel gray area. She earned too much to qualify for government aid, but too little to actually afford her medical care. 3 months before the wedding, Clara received news that left her devastated. Her doctor, Dr. Herrera, called her for an emergency appointment. "Clara, the latest blood tests show that lupus is affecting your kidneys more than we had seen before," the doctor explained with a seriousness Clara had learned to fear. "We need to start a more aggressive treatment immediately." "How aggressive?" Clara asked, although part of her already knew the answer wasn't going to be something she could afford. "Stronger immunosuppressants, possibly low-dose chemotherapy, to control the autoimmune response. These are expensive medications, Clara, and they're going to require very close medical monitoring." Clara felt the world wobbling around her. "How much will it cost?" Dr. Herrera avoided her gaze. "With your current insurance, you'd be looking at $8,000 to $10,000 the first 3 months, and then approximately $3,000 monthly from maintenance." Clara did the math mentally. She earned $1,500 per month. Even if she didn't pay rent, didn't eat, didn't use electricity, she couldn't afford even a fraction of that treatment. "And without treatment?" she asked in a small voice. Dr. Herrera finally looked her in the eyes. "Clara, without treatment, you're looking at progressive kidney damage. In the worst case, complete kidney failure in the next few years. In the best case, permanent damage that will significantly affect your quality and life expectancy." Clara left that appointment feeling completely defeated. She walked the streets for hours, with no particular destination, trying to process the impossibility of her situation. She needed treatment she couldn't afford for a disease she hadn't chosen, while her twin sister was preparing to marry the man who had abandoned her for having that same disease. The irony was so cruel, it almost seemed like a bad joke from the universe. That night, Clara sat at her small kitchen table with a calculator, a pile of medical bills, and a notebook where she had been keeping track of all her expenses. The numbers were merciless in their clarity. There was no way to make it work. She could sell everything of value she had left, but that would give her maybe enough money for 1 month of the new treatment. She could borrow, but from whom? Elena was the only person in her life with resources, but how could she ask her sister for money without explaining why she needed it? And if she explained about her illness, she would have to explain why she had kept it secret, and that would inevitably lead to the story of Roberto. Clara considered all the options she could think of. Bank loans she didn't qualify for, credit cards she had already maxed out, full-time jobs she couldn't maintain due to her health condition. For the first time since her diagnosis, Clara found herself contemplating the possibility of simply giving up, of letting the disease follow its natural course and accepting the consequences. At least that way, she wouldn't have to keep fighting impossible numbers every day. Her phone buzzed with a message from Elena, a photo of her and Roberto at an elegant dinner, both smiling perfectly for the camera. celebrating our 2-year anniversary. Only 2 more months to officially become Mrs. Castillo. I can't wait. Clara looked at the photo for a long time. Roberto looked exactly the same as when he left her, when he told her he couldn't handle the uncertainty of her illness. He looked prosperous, confident, like a man who had never had to face a really difficult decision in his life. She wondered if Elena knew what kind of man Roberto really was when things got difficult. She wondered if Roberto had ever told her about his first girlfriend, the one who got sick just before their wedding. She wondered if Roberto had learned anything from that experience, or if he had simply been lucky to find a healthy woman the second time. That night, Clara made a decision she had been avoiding for months. If she wasn't going to be able to afford the treatment she needed to live, at least she could make sure her sister had everything that remained of their shared family history. She began systematically packing all the family photos, important documents, the few pieces of jewelry she still hadn't sold. Each thing she packed came with an explanatory note for Elena. This is a photo from both our first day of school. Mom always said you look more confident than me. This is the necklace Dad gave Mom on their 10th anniversary. She always wanted one of us to wear it at her wedding. While packing, Clara wrote a letter she planned to leave with the boxes. Elena, if you're reading this, it means you finally found these things I saved for you. I want to make sure you had everything that's really important from our family. You've always been a strong one, the successful one, the one who deserves all the good things life can offer. Please take care of these things better than I could take care of them. You've always been my hero, even when you didn't know it. I hope you're happy forever, because if anyone deserves a perfect life, it's you. She didn't sign the letter. She wasn't ready for that final conversation yet. The days passed, and the wedding date approached inexorably. Clara had her final fitting for the maid of honor dress, a beautiful dress that Elena had insisted on paying for, and that probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent. You look beautiful, Elena exclaimed when Clara came out of the dressing room, but Clara could see concern in her sister's eyes. It was hard to hide how much weight she had lost, how her cheeks had sunken slightly, how her hands trembled almost imperceptibly when she was tired. Have you been eating well? Elena asked while the seamstress made last-minute adjustments to the dress that now fit Clara too loosely. Of course, Clara lied. The truth was that she had been regularly skipping meals to save money for her medications, a strategy she knew was counterproductive for her health, but seemed like the only available option. Elena moved closer, lowering her voice so the seamstress couldn't hear. Clara, I know something's going on. I've known you since before birth. Literally. We shared the same womb. You can't hide anything from me forever. For a moment, Clara considered telling the complete truth about the lupus, about the financial crisis, about Roberto, about the night she spent awake wondering if she had the strength to keep fighting. But then she saw the light of pure happiness in her sister's eyes, the radiant joy of a woman who was 1 week away from marrying the love of her life, and she couldn't destroy that. I'm just nervous about the speech, Clara said, offering the most believable explanation she could think of. You know, I don't like crowds, and there are going to be more than 200 people. Elena smiled with understanding and squeezed her hand. You're going to be perfect. You always are. And Clara, I want you to know that no matter what happens in life, we'll always have each other, okay? We're twin sisters. That's forever. If only she knew how far from perfect her sister is. Thought Clara. If only she knew how many lies I've had to tell to maintain this facade of normalcy. The wedding week arrived with frenetic intensity. Clara volunteered to help with all the last-minute preparations, partly because she knew Elena needed her, but mainly because staying busy was the only way not to think about the impossibility of her medical situation. 2 days before the ceremony, Clara received a call she had been dreading. It was from the hospital billing office. Mrs. Mendoza, we're calling to inform you that your account is significantly overdue. If we don't receive a substantial payment before Friday, we'll have to suspend your services and transfer your debt to a collection agency. How much do you need? Clara asked, although she already knew she didn't have the answer they wanted to hear. The current balance is $8,400. We could accept a minimum payment of $3,000 to keep your account active. Clara closed her eyes. She had exactly $247 in her bank account. "Can I call you back after the weekend?" she asked. "I'm at my sister's wedding and can't handle this right now." "Of course, ma'am, but we need to hear from you before Tuesday or we'll proceed with suspension." That night, Clara stayed awake until very late, sitting in her kitchen with all her medical account papers spread across the table. No matter from what angle she looked at the numbers, the conclusion was always the same. She had no way to pay what she owed, much less what she was going to need for future treatment. For the first time, Clara wrote what she knew could be her last letter to Elena. "Sister, if something happens to me, I want you to know that these have been the most difficult years of my life, but also that your joy has been the only thing that has given me strength to keep going. Seeing you happy, seeing you successful, seeing you loved, has reminded me that the world can still be beautiful even when my small part of it has become very dark. I don't want you to feel guilty about anything. I don't want you to change your perfect life for my complicated life. I just want you to be happy forever." The night before the wedding, Clara couldn't sleep at all. The pain in her joints was intense, a clear sign that another severe flare was approaching. She took 2 extra pain pills, knowing they would make her drowsy the next day, but that was the only way she could function during the ceremony. She stayed awake looking at the boxes packed for Elena, thinking about all the happy moments those photos and memories represented. Her childhood had been perfect, full of love and laughter and the security of having a twin sister who was her best friend and adventure companion. At what point had everything become so complicated? At what point had she begun keeping secrets from the most important person in her life? Clara knew the answer was simple. She had begun keeping secrets the day she decided that protecting Elena's happiness was more important than her own honesty. But now, sitting in the darkness of her apartment the night before watching her sister marry the man who had abandoned her, she wondered if she had made the right decision. The wedding morning arrived with a perfectly blue sky, an ideal temperature. Clara woke up after sleeping barely 2 hours, with joints stiff as wooden boards and a new rash on her neck that she would have to carefully cover with makeup. She showered slowly, each movement deliberate to avoid increasing the pain she already felt throughout her body. The hot water helped a little with the stiffness, but couldn't do anything about the deep fatigue she felt even in her bones. The maid of honor dress fit her more loosely than it had at the final fitting, evidence of the additional pounds she had lost during the previous week. The seamstress had done a good job adjusting it, but Clara felt like a child playing dress-up in adult clothes. She applied makeup carefully, using extra concealer to cover the deep dark circles and reddish spots that lupus had left on her skin. With enough foundation and blush, she almost looked healthy. Almost. At 9 in the morning, Clara arrived at the hotel where Elena was getting ready. The bridal suite would control chaos of activity. 3 bridesmaids running from side to side, 2 makeup artists working simultaneously, a hairstylist performing miracles with Elena's hair, and flowers arriving every few minutes. Elena looked absolutely radiant. Her wedding dress was a work of art, every detail perfectly executed. Her makeup and hairstyle made her look like a fairy tale princess. It was impossible to look at her without smiling, without feeling at least a little of the contagious happiness she radiated. "Clara, you finally arrived." Elena ran toward her and hugged her tightly. "How did you sleep? You look a little tired." "May have honor nerves," Clara replied automatically. "I want everything to be perfect for you." "It's already perfect," Elena said, twirling in her dress. "Can you believe it? Today I'm getting married. After all these years wondering if I'd ever find the right person, it's finally happening." One of the bridesmaids, Jessica, approached with a tray of mimosas. "Let's toast to the most beautiful bride in the world." Clara took a glass, although she knew she shouldn't mix alcohol with her medications. But it was her sister's wedding, and if there was a day to make exceptions, it was this one. "To Elena," she said, raising her glass. "To finding true love and living happily ever after." While the other girls drank and laughed, Clara noticed a reflection in one of the hotel mirrors. Standing next to Elena, the difference was notable. Elena glowed with health and happiness. Clara looked worn out, like a faded version of her twin sister. "Do you have your speech ready?" Elena asked while one of the makeup artists touched up her lipstick. Clara patted the folded paper in her purse. "Of course. I hope it doesn't make you cry too much and ruin your makeup." "A little crying is fine," Elena said, laughing. "It's my wedding. I'm supposed to cry with happiness." If only she knew what kind of tears my speech is really going to cause, thought Clara. The morning hours passed in a cloud of preparations. Clara helped with everything she could, distributing flowers, coordinating with the photographer, making sure all the bridesmaids had everything they needed. Staying busy was good. It prevented her from thinking too much about what was about to happen. At 11 in the morning, guests began arriving at the garden where the ceremony would take place. Clara recognized many. Uncles and aunts she hadn't seen in years, distant cousins, college friends, colleagues from Elena and Roberto's work. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there. There was festive energy in the air, the kind of contagious joy only found at weddings. Clara found herself genuinely smiling as she greeted family members and helped guests find their seats. Then she saw Roberto. He was standing near the altar, adjusting his tie and laughing with his groomsmen. He looked prosperous and confident, exactly like the man who had once promised to love her forever before fleeing at the first sign of real difficulty. Their eyes met for a moment across the garden full of people. Roberto saw her, and for a fraction of a second, Clara saw something in his expression. Recognition? Guilt? Fear? But the moment passed quickly, and Roberto returned his attention to his friends as if nothing had happened. Clara felt a complex mixture of emotions, pain for the past, anger at how he had treated her, and curiously, a kind of morbid curiosity about whether Roberto had really changed or if Elena had simply been lucky to meet him when things were easy. "Are you okay?" Jessica asked, approaching Clara. "You look a little pale." "Just heat," Clara lied. "I'm not used to being on my feet in heels for so long." Half an hour before the ceremony, Clara escaped the hotel bathroom to take her midday medications and emotionally regroup. She looked at herself in the mirror and practiced her maid of honor smile, the expression she would have to maintain for the next several hours. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Clara, this is Roberto. We need to talk after the ceremony. Please." Clara looked at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. There was nothing Roberto could tell her that she wanted to hear, at least not today. The ceremony began promptly at 2 in the afternoon. Clara walked down the aisle carrying her bridesmaid bouquet, smiling at the guests seated on both sides. The garden looked perfect, decorated with white and gold flowers that perfectly complemented Elena's dress. Roberto waited for her at the altar, handsome in his black tuxedo. When Elena appeared at the end of the aisle on the arm of her godfather, her favorite uncle since their father had died years before, the entire audience stood up. Elena looked absolutely perfect, as if she had stepped out of a wedding magazine. Clara stood in her designated place, holding Elena's bouquet and smiling for cameras. Throughout the ceremony, she maintained her composure, but part of her couldn't stop observing Roberto. Did he really understand what he was promising when he said in sickness and in health? Did he know what those words really meant when they weren't just pretty phrases in a ceremony, but difficult realities of daily life? If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace, said the officiant. Silence spread to the garden. Clara felt the weight of everything she knew, everything she had kept secret for years. But this was Elena's moment, not hers. She remained silent, as she had promised she would. Then, by the power vested in me by the state, I pronounce you husband and wife. Roberto, you may kiss the bride. The audience erupted in applause as Roberto and Elena kissed. Clara applauded too, genuinely happy for her sister, even as her heart broke a little more. The reception began immediately after in the same garden, now reconfigured with round tables and a dance floor. Clara sat at the main table, next to the other members of the wedding party, trying to seem cheerful while conversing with people she hadn't seen in years. The food was excellent, although Clara could barely eat a few bites. Her stomach was upset, a combination of emotional stress and side effects from her medications. She drank water constantly, trying to stay hydrated and alert. During dinner, Clara observed Elena and Roberto at their main table. They looked genuinely happy, constantly touching, whispering things that made them laugh. It was obvious that Roberto was in love with Elena, and Elena was radiant with happiness. That made everything more complicated. Clara had secretly hoped for years that Roberto would turn out to be a bad husband to Elena, that he would show his true character and retroactively justify what he had done to Clara. But seeing how he treated her, how he looked at her, it was obvious that Roberto really loved Elena. Did that mean the problem had been Clara? That she really had been too difficult to love? Or did it mean that Roberto had learned something from his previous experience? After the main course, the master of ceremonies began with the traditional toasts. First spoke Roberto's best man, then Elena's uncle who had walked her down the aisle, and finally it was Clara's turn. Now, let's hear some words from the maid of honor, Clara Mendoza. Clara rose slowly, feeling all the gazes of 200 guests on her. Her legs felt unsteady, but she wasn't sure it was from the lupus or from nerves. She walked toward the podium they had installed near the main table, trying not to show how much each step hurt. She took the paper with her speech from her purse, but when she unfolded it, the words she had written seemed completely inadequate for the moment. She had planned to give a generic speech about love and happiness, but standing there, looking at her twin sister married to a man who had abandoned her when she needed him most, she realized she couldn't keep living in the lie. Clara looked up from the paper and looked directly at Elena, who was watching her with expectation and love in her eyes. "Elena," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "you have been my life companion since the moment we were born. We share the same DNA, the same childhood memories, the same parents, the same history. But there are things we never shared, things I kept only to myself because I thought it was right." A murmur spread through the audience. Elena seemed confused, her smile fading slightly. Clara took a deep breath, knowing there was no turning back after what she was about to say. 10 years ago, I was also about to get married. I had my dress, we had sent the invitations, we had paid the venue deposit. 3 weeks before my wedding, I was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, an autoimmune disease that has no cure. The silence in the garden became absolute. Clara could hear her own heart beating. My fiancé couldn't handle the reality of having a wife with a chronic illness. He left me, telling me he couldn't handle the uncertainty of my condition. I canceled my wedding, returned the gifts, and spent the following years learning to live with a disease that makes some days impossible for me to even get out of bed. Roberto had gone completely pale. His eyes were fixed on Clara with an expression of absolute terror. Clara continued, her voice now firmer. "That man is named Roberto Castillo, and 2 years ago he married my sister without knowing I was a woman whose heart he had broken." Gasps filled the air. Elena stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. Roberto looked like he wanted to disappear from existence. "I never told Elena about our previous relationship because I didn't want to ruin her happiness," Clara continued. "But being here today, seeing how he promises to love her forever, I need to know. Roberto, do you really understand what those vows you just made mean?" Clara's voice became more intense, fueled by 10 years of repressed pain. "Do you understand what in sickness and in health means? Because when I was scared and sick, when I most needed someone to tell me everything would be okay, you told me you couldn't handle the uncertainty of my condition and left me alone." Roberto stood up, clearly desperate. "Clara, that was a long time ago. I was young." 10 years isn't that long when you live with a chronic disease," Clara replied, interrupting him. "Every day of these 10 years I've woken up wondering if I'm enough, If I deserve love, if someday someone will be able to see beyond my illness and love the person I really am. Elena approached the podium, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Clara, why did you never tell me you were sick? Why have you been suffering alone all these years? Because you're my perfect sister and you deserve a perfect life, Clara said simply. But you also deserve to know the truth about the man you just married. Clara addressed Roberto again, who looked completely devastated. Elena is identical to me in everything except one thing. She's healthy. It's easy to promise eternal love when there are no real challenges to face. The question is, what are you going to do the first time Elena needs you to be strong for her? The tension in the garden was so intense it could be cut with a knife. Some guests murmured among themselves. Others remained completely still, captivated by this devastating revelation. Clara felt her legs begin to tremble, but continued with what she knew might be her last chance to tell the truth. I've lived these 10 years feeling like I was enough, like my illness made me less worthy of love. I've sold our mother's jewelry to pay for my medications. I've worked part-time jobs because lupus flares prevent me from working full-time. I've lied to everyone about how sick I am because I learned that people run away when reality becomes too difficult. Elena moved closer, trying to take Clara's hand. Why didn't you ever ask me for help? Why didn't you ever tell me? Clara looked at her with tears in her eyes. Because I didn't want to be a burden on your perfect life. Because you have everything I lost: health, career, love. I didn't want my darkness to overshadow your light. You're my twin sister, Elena said with a broken voice. Your darkness is my darkness. Your pain is my pain. We're the same person in two different bodies. Roberto finally found his voice, although it sounded completely broken. Clara, I'm so sorry. You don't know how much I've regretted that decision. But I was young, I was afraid. I didn't know how to handle something so big. Clara looked at him with a mixture of sadness and determination that had been building for a decade. Roberto, I don't need your apology. I need you to understand what you're really promising Elena today. Marriage isn't just for the good days. If you really love her, you need to be prepared for everything life might bring. She turned to the entire audience, her voice now clear and strong despite the exhaustion she felt. I came here planning to give a nice speech about love and happiness. But I realize I can't talk about true love without talking about honesty, about being present in difficult moments, about not running when life gets complicated. Clara paused, looking directly at Elena. Sister, you deserve someone who loves you not only when you're young and beautiful and healthy, but when you're old, when you're sick, when you have bad days, when life gets really difficult. You deserve someone who understands that true love doesn't flee at the first adversity. Tears were now flowing freely down Elena's face. Why did you wait until today to tell me this? Clara smiled sadly. Because 3 days ago my doctor told me I need treatment that costs $10,000 and that without it, I probably won't live to see your 5th wedding anniversary. And I realize I can't leave this world knowing I kept secrets from the person I love most. A collective gasp was heard throughout the garden. Elena put her hands to her mouth, completely horrified. And also, Clara continued, looking directly at Roberto, because I want to make sure Roberto understands exactly what he's promising when he says he's going to love you in sickness and in health. Because those words are easy to say on a perfect day like today, but their true meaning is tested when things get really difficult. Roberto approached the podium, his eyes full of tears. Clara, if I could go back. But you can't, Clara interrupted. None of us can. But you can decide what kind of husband you're going to be to Elena from today on. You can decide if you're going to run the first time she really needs you, or if you're going to stay and fight. Clara addressed the entire audience one last time. This isn't the perfect love story you all came to celebrate today, but it's a real story about what it means to love someone completely, about the difference between conditional love and true love, about the courage needed to be honest with the people we love even when the truth is painful. But just as Clara was finishing speaking, she felt her legs finally give way. The emotional stress, combined with the lupus flare she had been fighting control all day, completely overwhelmed her. She collapsed, but Elena caught her before she hit the ground. "Call an ambulance." Elena screamed, holding her sister in her arms. "Please, someone call 911 right now." The garden that had been full of tense silence immediately filled with frantic activity. Several guests took out their phones. Others approached to see if they could help. Roberto stood where he was, watching the scene with an expression of absolute horror and belated understanding. While they waited for the ambulance, Clara briefly regained consciousness in Elena's arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I ruined your perfect day." "You didn't ruin anything," Elena replied, stroking Clara's hair. "You gave me the greatest gift you could give me, the truth, and the opportunity to be the sister I should have been from the beginning." In the hospital, Clara woke up 4 hours later in an emergency room bed, connected to an intravenous drip and surrounded by constantly beeping monitors. The first thing she saw was Elena sitting in a chair beside her bed, still wearing her wedding dress, but with makeup completely streaked from tears. "How do you feel?" Elena asked immediately, taking Clara's hand. "Like a truck ran over me," Clara replied hoarsely. "What happened after I fainted?" Elena sighed deeply. "The ambulance came. They brought you here. The doctor said you had a collapse caused by extreme stress and a severe lupus flare." "Clara, why didn't you tell me how serious your condition was?" Clara tried to sit up, but Elena gently stopped her. "Where's Roberto?" Clara asked. "He left," Elena said simply. "After they took you in the ambulance, he came up to me, told me he was very sorry and left. I haven't heard from him since." Clara felt a mixture of sadness for her sister and a strange satisfaction at having her suspicions about Roberto's character confirmed. "Elena, I'm so sorry. I ruined your wedding. I ruined your perfect day." "Clara, stop," Elena interrupted firmly. "You didn't ruin anything. You opened my eyes. You showed me who the man I married really is. And more importantly, you showed me that my twin sister, the most important person in my life, has been suffering in silence for years while I lived in my perfect bubble." Elena moved closer, taking both of Clara's hands. "We're going to fix this. You're going to come live with me. We're going to get the best medical treatment available, and you're never going to face this alone again. Did you hear me? Never again." "Elena, you can't just change your entire life for me." "I'm not changing my life for you," Elena replied with determination. "I'm reclaiming my sister. I'm being the person I should have been from the beginning, if I had paid more attention to the signs you were giving me." A doctor entered the room, interrupting their conversation. He was an older man with gray hair and a serious but kind expression. "Miss Mendoza, I'm Dr. Williams, the rheumatologist on call. I've reviewed your blood tests and medical history, and I need to talk to you about your condition." Clara felt her stomach contract. "How bad is it?" "Your lupus is in a very active phase right now, and it's seriously affecting your kidneys. Without immediate and intensive treatment, we're looking at the possibility of permanent kidney damage within months." Elena went pale. What kind of treatment does she need? High-potency immunosuppressants, possibly low-dose chemotherapy, and very close medical monitoring. It's an intensive and expensive regimen, but with it, most patients can achieve remission and lead relatively normal lives. "How much does it cost?" Elena asked before Clara could speak. The doctor seemed uncomfortable. "With basic health insurance, we're talking about $8,000 to $10,000 the first 3 months, and then approximately $3,000 monthly." Elena didn't hesitate for a second. "Do it. Everything she needs. I'll take care of all the costs." "Elena, you can't." "Yes, I can, and I'm going to," Elena said with determination Clara had never heard before. "Clara, I'm a partner at a law firm. I earn more money than I can spend, and I don't have anyone more important in my life than you. This isn't even a question." Clara began to cry, but for the first time in years, they were tears of relief instead of desperation. Dr. Williams smiled for the first time since he had entered the room. Well, with that kind of family support, I think we have very good chances of getting this disease under control. I'm going to start the paperwork for the new treatment regimen immediately. After the doctor left, Elena sat back down beside Clara's bed. Why did you never tell me you needed money? Why did you never ask me for help? Clara sighed. Because you were the successful sister, the one who had everything under control. I was the one who had failed at everything. Lost my fiancé, lost my career, lost my health. I didn't want you to see me as a burden. Clara, look at me, Elena said, taking her face in her hands. You're my twin sister. You're literally the other half of my soul. You're not a burden. You're my most important responsibility. And I failed in that responsibility by not realizing what you were going through. It's not your fault. Maybe not. But from today, it's going to be my priority. And Clara, about Roberto, I need to know everything. Everything that happened between you two. Everything you're hiding from me. I need the complete story. For the next 2 hours, Clara told Elena the whole truth. About her relationship with Roberto. About the lupus diagnosis. About how he had abandoned her. About the years of financial struggle. About selling their mother's jewelry. About lost jobs. About sleepless nights wondering if it was worth continuing to fight. Elena listened to everything in silence, her expression changing from shock to sadness to anger and finally to determination. How could I have been so blind? Elena murmured when Clara finished. How did I not realize you were suffering so much? Because I became very good at pretending I was okay, Clara replied. And because you were living your own life, as you should have been doing. Elena remained silent for several minutes, processing everything she had heard. Clara, do you ever regret not saying something before? Not preventing me from marrying him? Clara considered the question carefully. Honestly, no, because for 2 years, Roberto made you happy. I saw you more joyful than I had ever seen you. If I had said something from the beginning, I would have robbed you of those 2 years of happiness. But maybe you would have saved me from today's betrayal. Or maybe, Clara said softly, Roberto really had changed, and he just needed to face his past to be able to move forward with you. Elena looked at her with surprise. Are you defending him after everything he did to you? I'm not defending him, Clara clarified, but I think people can change. The question is whether Roberto really changed, or if he just had the luck to find an easier situation with you. And what do you think is the answer? I think, Clara said slowly, that the answer lies in what Roberto does now. If he really has changed, if he really loves you, he's going to fight for you despite how uncomfortable it must be for him to face what he did to me. And if not, well, then you'll know I made the right decision telling you the truth today. As if the universe had been waiting for that statement. Someone knocked softly on the hospital room door. Elena got to open it, and there was Roberto, still wearing his wedding tuxedo but completely disheveled, with red and swollen eyes as if he'd been crying for hours. Can I come in? He asked hoarsely. Please, I need to talk to both of you. Elena looked at Clara, who nodded weakly. Elena opened the door completely and Roberto entered, maintaining a respectful distance from the bed. Clara, he began, his voice trembling. First of all, are you okay? I stayed in the hospital parking lot until the doctor told me you were stable. I'm going to be fine, Clara replied cautiously. What do you want, Roberto? Roberto took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for the most important words of his life. I want to ask for your forgiveness. Not a superficial apology, but a real acknowledgement of what I did to you and the damage I caused. But first, I want to tell you something I never told anyone, not even Elena. He sat in the only available chair, keeping his trembling hands on his knees. After I left you, I didn't sleep well for 2 years. Every night, I would wake up thinking about you, wondering if you were okay, if you had found the treatment you needed, if there was someone taking care of you. But I was too cowardly to call you, too ashamed to face what I had done. Clara looked at him with a neutral expression, But Elena could see she was carefully listening to every word. When I met Elena at that corporate law conference, the first thing that attracted me to her was that she reminded me of someone. It took me weeks to realize she reminded me of you. She had your same laugh, your same way of tilting her head when she was thinking, your same kindness with strangers. Elena was surprised. You never told me that. Because I was ashamed, Roberto admitted. Because part of me knew I was falling in love with Elena because she gave me the opportunity to be the man I should have been with you, Clara. Roberto addressed Clara again. But even knowing that, I never looked for you. I never tried to fix things. I never tried to be better. I simply took the opportunity to start over with someone who didn't know my history. And what changed today? Clara asked. Today I realized I hadn't changed at all, Roberto said, tears beginning to run down his face. Because the moment things got really difficult, the moment I had to face my past and fight for my marriage, what did I do? I left, exactly like I did with you 10 years ago. Elena remained motionless, processing this revelation. Elena, Roberto continued, turning toward her, I love you. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. But Clara was right in everything she said today. I don't know if I'm the man you deserve because I've never really been tested. With you, everything has been easy, perfect, without real complications. He stood up and began pacing nervously around the small room. After they took Clara in the ambulance, I stayed in that garden surrounded by 200 guests who looked at me like I was a monster. And you know what I thought? I didn't think about you, Elena. I didn't think about comforting you or supporting you in what must have been one of the most difficult moments of your life. I thought about myself, about my shame, about my humiliation, and I left. Roberto stopped in front of Elena, falling to his knees beside her chair. That tells me Clara was right, that I'm the same person I was 10 years ago, that when things get really difficult, my instinct is to run instead of fight. Elena looked at him with a mixture of pain and confusion. Why did you come back then? Because after spending 4 hours in my car in the parking lot, reflecting on everything Clara said, I realized something. I have a choice. I can continue being the man who runs when things get complicated, or I can decide to be different. But I can't just say I'm going to change. I have to prove it. Roberto addressed Clara again. Clara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to trust me. But I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man I should have been when you needed me most. And I'm going to start by helping with your medical expenses. Clara blinked, surprised. Roberto, I don't need your money. Yes, you do, Roberto said firmly. And I need to do this, not as a way to buy forgiveness, but as a way to face the consequences of my actions. For 10 years, you live with the consequences of my cowardice. It's time for me to live with them too. Elena had remained silent during this exchange, but finally spoke. Roberto, what do you expect to happen now? That we go home and pretend this day didn't happen? Roberto shook his head. No, I hope you give me the opportunity to prove I can be different. Not today, not tomorrow, but for however long it takes. And if after that you decide you can't trust me, I'll understand. And what about Clara? Elena asked, how are we going to handle the fact that you're married to me but have this history with her? It was Clara who answered. Elena, Roberto and I ended 10 years ago. What I feel for him now isn't romantic love. I don't know how to describe it. It's like an old wound that never completely healed. But I don't want that to ruin what you have with him if you really believe he can change. But how will I know if he's really changed? Elena asked. There's only one way, Clara said thoughtfully. Time and real circumstances. Roberto, are you willing for Elena and me to live together while I recover? Are you willing for her to be my primary caregiver during the next months of intensive treatment? Roberto didn't hesitate. Of course. And are you willing for me to be part of your lives from now on? Not as an ex-girlfriend, but as Elena's sister who has a chronic illness and will need ongoing support. Yes, Roberto said without hesitation. And are you willing to go to couples therapy with Elena to work on the trust issues this will inevitably create? Roberto looked at Elena. If Elena is willing, yes. Elena considered everything she had heard. Roberto, there's something else I need to know. In these 2 years we've been together, did you ever think about telling me about Clara? Roberto lowered his head, ashamed. Many times, especially after you told me you had a twin sister. I always wondered if there might be some connection, but I never had the courage to ask or investigate. Why not? Because I was afraid that if you discovered my past, you would leave me like I left Clara. It was pure cowardice disguised as self-preservation. Elena nodded slowly. At least you're honest about that. They remained in silence for several minutes, each processing the day's revelations. Finally, Elena spoke. Roberto, I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if I can trust you after knowing what you did to Clara, but I'm willing to try with conditions. Roberto straightened hopefully. Any conditions? First condition, couples therapy immediately. We're not going to pretend we can get through this alone. Done. Second condition, Clara moves in with me, and you're going to completely support her medical treatment, not as charity but as responsibility. Done. Third condition, total honesty from now on. If you ever keep another secret from me about something important, we're done immediately. Understood. And fourth condition, Elena paused, looking directly into Roberto's eyes. The next time we have a real crisis in our marriage, you stay and fight. No matter how uncomfortable it gets, no matter how difficult it becomes, you stay. Roberto nodded solemnly. I promise. Clara had been watching this exchange with fascination. Elena, are you sure this is what you want? You don't have to stay with him for me. Elena took Clara's hand. I'm not staying with him for you. I'm staying with him because I believe people can change if they really want to. And because I think Roberto really loves me, even if he doesn't know how to show it when things get difficult. She addressed Roberto. But I want you to understand something very clearly. This is your only chance. If you run again, if you show cowardice again when I need you, there won't be a third chance. I understand, Roberto said. And Elena, I want you to know I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can be the man you deserve. 6 months later, Clara was sitting on Elena's apartment balcony, enjoying the afternoon sun while reading a book. Her new treatment had worked better than anyone had expected. The medications had put her lupus into almost complete remission, and for the first time in years, she had consecutive days where she felt completely normal. Elena came home from work and found her there, smiling to see her sister with color in her cheeks and energy in her eyes. How do you feel today? Elena asked, as she did every day. Like a normal person, Clara replied, smiling. It's incredible what proper medicine can do when you can afford it. They had established a comfortable routine during these months. Clara had returned to working full-time at the library and had begun volunteer work with other lupus patients, helping them navigate the healthcare system and find financial resources. Roberto had been true to his word. He had paid all of Clara's medical expenses without complaint, had religiously attended couples therapy with Elena, and had shown remarkable patience during Clara's difficult days when medications made her feel bad or when she had frequent medical appointments. How are things going with Roberto? Clara asked, a question she had begun asking weekly. Better, Elena admitted. Therapy is helping. He's learning to talk about his fears instead of just running from them. And you were right, Clara. I think he really can change when he commits to doing it. And you? Are you happy? Elena considered the question. I'm hopeful, which is different from the naive happiness I had before. But maybe it's more solid. I'm building a relationship with a man I now know completely, including his flaws. That feels more real than perfection I thought we had before. That afternoon, when Roberto came home, the three of them sat down to dinner together, something that had begun as a practical necessity, but had become a cherished tradition. "I have news," Clara announced during dessert. "My doctor says I'm stable enough to look for my own apartment again." Elena and Roberto exchanged glances. "Do you want to move out?" Elena asked. Clara smiled. "I want to have the option to move out, but the truth is I like living here. I like having my sister close. I like our family dinners. I like feeling like I belong somewhere." "Then stay," Roberto said immediately. "This place is big enough for all of us." "Are you sure? I know you probably want your newlywed privacy." "Clara," Elena interrupted, "we've been happier these 6 months with you here than the 2 years before without you. I don't want you to leave unless you really want to." "And you, Roberto?" Clara asked. "Are you really okay with your sister-in-law being your ex-girlfriend who lives in your house permanently?" Roberto laughed, something he had begun doing more frequently in recent months. "Clara, you're no longer my ex-girlfriend who lives in my house. You're my wife's sister who became my family too. And honestly, getting to know you again has helped me understand much better about both love and myself." 1 year later, the family had found a completely new rhythm. Clara had met David, a social worker who also lived with a chronic illness, type 1 diabetes, in one of her support groups. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual understanding about the challenges of living with lifelong medical conditions. Elena and Roberto had renewed their wedding vows in a small, intimate ceremony, this time with promises they really understood and had been tested by real circumstances. "Do you ever regret telling the truth that day at the wedding?" David asked Clara one afternoon as they walked through the park. Clara considered the question, looking toward the lake where Elena and Roberto were having a picnic with some friends. "Never," she finally replied, "because that day I didn't just save my sister from a marriage based on half-truths. I saved myself from a life of lies and secrets. And I gave Roberto the chance to become a better man." "And do you think he really changed?" Clara smiled, seeing how Roberto patiently helped Elena prepare the food, how he made sure there were food options that were safe for Clara's diet, how he had brought extra medications in case David needed them. "I think people can change when they really want to and when they have the right reasons to change." Roberto had to face the consequences of who he had been before he could decide who he wanted to be after. David nodded. "It's a powerful lesson about forgiveness and second chances. But also about honesty," Clara added. "For 10 years, I kept secrets I thought I was keeping to protect the people I loved. But in the end, those secrets were hurting everyone. Elena married someone she didn't really know. Roberto never had to face the consequences of his actions. And I lived in unnecessary isolation and pain. What would you tell other people who are keeping similar secrets?" Clara thought carefully before answering. "I would tell them that truth is difficult, but lies are more difficult in the long run. I would tell them that people who really love you can handle your reality, even when that reality is complicated or painful. And I would tell them that you deserve to be loved for who you really are, not for who you pretend to be." They remained silent for a moment, watching Elena and Roberto interact with their friends. "There's something beautiful in this," David murmured, "in how something that began so painfully became something so healing for everyone involved." "Yes," Clara agreed, "but it only worked because everyone was willing to do the hard work. Roberto had to face his cowardice and really change. Elena had to decide if she could forgive and trust again, and I had to learn to accept help and love without feeling like a burden." The final lesson. That night, while the four of them were sitting on Elena and Roberto's terrace sharing stories and laughing, Clara reflected on the path that had led them to that moment. The wedding had been ruined, yes, but from those ashes had emerged something much more valuable. A family based on complete honesty, a marriage strengthened by having faced a real crisis, and a sister who had recovered not only her health, but also her place in the world. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked, noticing Clara's contemplative expression. "About how sometimes we have to break something completely to be able to build it correctly," Clara replied. Roberto raised his wine glass. to second chances, Elena raised hers. To honesty, no matter how difficult it is, David joined in. To the families we choose and the ones we find. And finally, Clara. To the courage to tell the truth, even when we don't know how the story will end. Epilogue, 5 years later. Clara and David married in a small ceremony in the same garden where Elena's first wedding had taken place. This time, Elena was Clara's maid of honor, and Roberta walked Clara down the aisle, representing their deceased father. In her speech as maid of honor, Elena said, "My sister taught me that true love is not the absence of problems, but the presence of commitment to face those problems together. That honesty is more valuable than perfection, and that sometimes the best love stories are those born from second chances and difficult truths." Elena and Roberto had 2 children, who grew up knowing their Aunt Clara as an essential part of their extended family. Clara became a recognized advocate for patients with autoimmune diseases, helping to change health insurance policies at the state level. And Roberto, true to his word, never ran again when things got difficult. When Elena had complications during her second pregnancy, he took leave from work to care for her. When Clara had a lupus relapse 3 years later, he was there to support both Clara and Elena during the months of recovery. The story that began with painful secrets and a devastating revelation at a wedding became a testament to the power of truth, forgiveness, and the real possibility of change when people are willing to do the necessary work. And if anyone asked them what was the most important moment in their family's history, all 4 would answer the same thing. The day Clara had the courage to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember the power of honesty and forgiveness. And remember, we all deserve to be loved for who we really are, not for who we pretend to be. Subscribe for more real stories that change lives.